listened to a podcast of yours recently when you said that you hate doing Zoom calls. So I very much appreciate you being here. And also,
Well, no. I'll just clarify. I love doing this sort of thing.
okay,
It's like I don't like meetings, but I'm thrilled for this.
okay,
Like
brilliant.
I don't really consider this like I don't like want to talk to people about like minutia.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
thrilled
This
to
is the
be here.
fun. This is the fun Zoom.
Hmm.
But and also in your newsletter, you said that you're going to start saying no. You're going to be very kind of like um, kind of harsh about saying no to lots of things. So we're very, very grateful that you're here. But yeah, we are really enjoying the book so far. We had our
Awesome.
first group meetup to kind of dive in, and we kind of worked through the quiz. So I don't know if ever anybody's shared their scores yet in the chat. My score was 19. I feel like the first half of the quiz I did terribly on. The second half much better. But I suppose that's what it's all about, isn't it? Kind of working out where we stand, and that's kind of
Yeah.
like what we'll kind of talk through tonight, hopefully. But just so we can get an idea, a bit more idea about you and kind of and what you do. Where are you today? How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm in Miami. It's a beautiful day, and I've had a lot of just wonderful conversations this week, in particular about money and our nervous system, which is an additional piece that was not in Money: A Love Story, but is very current for me, and I'm loving teaching about that.
Wow, and is that so that's how kind of like your relationship with money shows up physiologically for
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
Yeah. Big, yeah, I think we're very much about kind of linking the mind-body connection here. So yeah, I can see how that would work. And actually on Monday, when we were talking about what's your relationship with money, a few people said straight away, oh, I feel tight, or my throat hurts, or my chest,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. And that just kind of
Mhm.
came out naturally. So yeah, really
Yeah,
relevant.
yeah, very.
And what does a typical day in your life look like?
Well, I get up at about 6:30 and then help my kids get breakfast, get them, dressed for school, get them off for school. We live just 2 blocks from school, so I walk them to school, and then my husband and I recently got a work apartment. So then I walk 2 more blocks south to our work apartment, where we both have our offices and our podcasting studio. And then I kind of work for the day, sometimes have a workout because there's also a gym here. Then I walk home and scoop up my kids on the way back and go home for dinner and bedtime.
Brilliant. How nice that
Yeah.
you can kind of have it. It sounds like it's very contained. So you're kind of,
I am like very much about looking at our lives and asking, where can I reduce complication? Where can I save time? How can I simplify and make things easier? So one of the ways we did that is when we found our kids' new school, we just moved 2 blocks away, and I don't live in my dream home, but I freaking love the ease of my life, and it's awesome.
yeah, amazing. Yeah, you're very much like creating, like you say, that creating a life, not just a live, it's not just making a living,
Yes.
it's creating the life.
Yes.
And I think what I'm really learning as I'm going through the book and what I hope we all will learn together is that it's rich. It means different things for everybody. And it's not
100%.
about all the millions in the bank. It's like what is a like Ramit Sethi, I think, is like, what is your rich life? And I think
Mhm.
it's really nice to be able to explore that and see what different people kind of how different people relate to that.
Yeah.
Do you have a word that would kind of sum up your rich life?
Hmm. A word to sum up my rich life. I think a word that I really love to use is savor, because we have so many blessings at all times, and our we are wired for survival. We are animals, and evolutionarily speaking, we have evolved so that our brains and our nervous systems, our brain is part of our nervous system, track for what's a threat. And so by default, we're really negative. Like we're just always tracking and sorting and sifting for what's the problem. And we really need to override that and rewire ourselves to focus on the blessings and savor what's already here. rather than sifting and sorting for what's a problem. And so savoring to me is one of the best ways, for me to enjoy my life, because there's already so many blessings. And, we see these things like on social media all the time that, think about the things that you have now that a decade ago you could have only dreamed of.
Yeah.
And I think we forget to do that. And so just really, it's so simple, it's cliche, but counting the blessings.
Yeah, so important.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's and being grateful for what we have brings in more, right? That's the
Yes,
idea.
it does.
That's the idea. Also, I love to ask, how would you describe your current relationship with yourself? And maybe for you, how has that changed since this book baby arrived? Is it
I
10 years
know.
old?
This book is 11 years old.
7 years old. Okay.
So it has been a while since I wrote it. I did update it in, I think, 2016. I recorded the audiobook. So if anybody gets the audiobook, it is updated and has a lot of additional asides, because I was like, oh,
I
well,
love those asides. And then you're like,
something new to say about that.
yeah.
But my relationship with myself right now, I would say the word would be deepening.
Mm,
Mhm. And what's different about it than, I think this book came out when I was 28 or 29. I didn't have any kids. I wasn't married. I was living a very different life. And so at that time, I was just, I think I had a lot of wisdom, but I hadn't caught up to
mm,
it. And there wasn't as much of an ownership of how much I did have to offer. And I look back, and Money a Love Story is having this incredible renaissance right now. It's selling the best it has sold in years. It's like, whoa. And so I just really honor that younger version of me to say, like, oh, you really had something helpful to say. And I felt like I fell into the book by accident. And so now I'm so grateful to be at a time in my life where, uh, I know I'm an author as a career. Then I was sort of like, whoa, what's happening? And just that sense of like maturation and taking my ideas more seriously. I mean, I think it just comes with age, but I'm grateful for it, because it feels more solid and more powerful.
yeah. And you do talk about a new book in your latest newsletter. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I'm like letting get the cat out of the bag or anything, but is there any more detail you can give on that? Is it something that's percolating or
It's percolating, but it's clear. It's about women, money, and the nervous system,
okay.
and the way that our nervous system is a way that we can really connect with source, with a capital S, and source our abundance from source, and reorganize our relationship with money so that we really feel relaxed, and
Mm,
so that we can source money and any kind of life force in our lives from a place of safety
mm,
and relaxation. So that's what the new book is going to be about.
amazing. Relax is one word I have never heard anybody use in relation to money. And
Well, it's a program that
that's
I launched in 2022, end of 2022. Actually, we were supposed to do this launch, and then my husband got hit by a car. He's fine, but it was terrible.
mm,
And so the whole launch needed to be delayed. And I had already planned on launching this new program called Relax Money. And then, things didn't feel relaxed at all in my household, because my husband is also my business partner. And we have two little girls. At the time, they were 4 and 7. And I really was, you know, we like decide to do these bodies of work, and then I think, at least in my experience, I then get invited to live them in a deeper way. And so that experience of launching Relax Money was a whole new level and new paradigm of leaning into trust and surrender, as we went through that health crisis with my husband, and then laid out this launch. And I just was like, I can't run this business and this launch from any kind of rushing or stress or pressure, because we're kind of all hands on deck. He had 2 surgeries, it was a whole thing. And so as a result, it was so wild to witness how I used the nervous system healing tools. I chose to surrender. I chose to relax. I chose to just be in trust. And it was, up until that point in our business, our biggest launch we had ever done. And we did it with fewer bells and whistles. My husband was like in the recovery recliner in the living room. I was shouting from the other room, okay, babe, that email's ready to go. Like, it was so bare bones. And the magnetism of that promotion was wild. We had people, like, so many tens of thousands of people coming to our free event. And it wasn't like we were spending a ton on ads. Like, it felt like magic. And I knew what we were tapping into was the magnetism of surrender and trust and relaxation, as opposed to what we've been taught, which is that if you want to have money come into your life, you better hustle for it. And there's a certain amount of stress and pressure and sacrifice that is required. And it was just a really wild experience, very meta, to be launching the program that taught the very thing I was needing to lean into so much more than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it so relevant though, right? And keeps it authentic and keeps people coming back.
Mhm.
So when you talk about you're teaching people to work less, it's like it's that anti-hustle, anti just kind of burning out almost. So it's
Yeah.
like work, do what you love, do what you can and enjoy. But
Yeah.
you don't, like you say, trust, you can trust and surrender, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. And really feel the way that we are provided for, um, by, the unseen forces. Like, one of my tools that I love to use is to tap into great mother energy and great father energy. So many of us have wounding around our own parents, um and that wounding shows up in our relationship to money, like ways that we were, emotionally abandoned or weren't provided for, or just, complexities, right? And yet we all have access to kind of the greater sense. My way of connecting to great mother energy is being in nature, lying on the ground, hugging a tree, going for a walk in the woods, swimming in the ocean. All of these things like help me tap into the way that I am held and supported at all times. And like, even in this moment, all of our needs are fully met. Like, if you're here on this book club, all is well. Like, you've got clean water, you have plenty of air, you have shelter, you have an internet connection.
Yeah.
All needs are met in this moment. And the more we can access that truth in our bodies, like, and really feel safe in knowing that all needs in this moment are met, we then take action around our finances and around income generation or tracking our money or what investing or whatever we need to do. We take aligned action in a much more powerful way than if we are taking action from fear and stress. And
Yeah.
so we get better results.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that's the same with lots of self-help, isn't it? Not going from a place of fear brings
Yes.
much different results, and you kind of, yeah, you're accessing it from a different state of mind. Somebody's asked actually in the chat, so you just mentioned tree hugging and being in nature, but do you have any other go-to tools? I know you do,
I do.
ritual
I have a
tools, yeah.
million.
Any that you could share just but maybe specifically for calming your nervous system, especially if anybody's kind of going into this work and freaking out a bit, which I
Yes.
feel like people might
Right.
be.
And I will just say, like, Money, a Love Story, I didn't know about the nervous system when I wrote it, but some of the tools and techniques in that book work because they're actually regulating your nervous system, which I didn't know when I came up with them, but it's cool. So one of my favorites is called havening. And I love this practice because you really can do it at any time. So we can all just practice it together. If you take your hands and you rub them over each other slowly. And as you're doing that, notice both what it feels like to touch your skin with the one hand, and then also notice what it feels like to be touched. by the other hand. So kind of put your attention on the sensory experience of, what does my hand feel like? What does my arm feel like? You know, you can really move to your forearms, you could move to your upper arms, and then put that focus on just the sensory experience of, what does it feel like on my skin? What does it feel like to be touched? And just notice what happens in your body as you do that. Just notice like what happens with your breathing. Notice what happens with your heart rate. Notice how you feel. And I'm curious if anyone wants to put into the chat, or if you want to share what you notice. That's a wonderful tool that can help to activate the parasympathetic response. That yeah, it's very calming. It's very calming. Yeah, I love it. Your son said he likes it. I saw him in there. I love that. Yeah, it's very soothing. It's very soothing. So if you're, maybe you're in a meeting with your financial planner, maybe you're in, maybe you're on a phone call that's making you nervous. Maybe you need to make a financial phone call or have a meeting that you're scared about. You're adding up the totals of your invoices for blessings already received, which is what I call debt. Whatever you're doing, we can do these practices to signal to our body that we are safe. And it allows us to re-imprint our nervous system that money is safe. Because most of us were raised in an environment where money was not safe. And the messages we received energetically was usually stress, pressure, and lack. And so this is a way we can rewire ourselves to make friends with our money and be in that loving relationship with it. So it doesn't need to feel scary. It can just like actually feel really yummy.
Yeah. Well, relaxing, like you said. I mean, I think
Relaxing.
that's just
Mhm.
goals, isn't it? To
Mhm.
feel relaxed around money. I did
Yeah.
notice I started doing it really quickly, and a few other people did as well. And then
Isn't
as
that
you
interesting?
as you were
Yeah.
being slow, then we kind of calmed down. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
makes such a difference, doesn't it?
It does.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's really, any practice that brings you into your five senses
Mhm.
will be regulating to the nervous system. But of course, there's, you know, there's much more specificity around how to know when to do which one. But I like to just have a small handful of tools that I can always go to, and it really helps.
Yeah, SOS, love it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so early on, so the book kind of works through different exercises, but to start with, we're quite heavy on the journaling and the kind of like just getting the information out there. So I wondered if you could, because we are our schedule is kind of week one, chapter one. So it's what is your money love story, or what is your money story? Because some people might not call theirs a love story yet,
Yes.
until they've done
Yet.
part three of the exercise yet. So I wondered if you could just talk us through that kind of exercise and kind of best practice for it.
Yeah. I just saw Melanie. Melanie said that she just had a bit of a rush of a panic feeling. So just if anybody just that practice made their nervous system go haywire, I would recommend doing a cross-body hug, like I call it the butterfly hug, and then tapping your shoulders alternatingly. That can really help also. Not every practice is going to work for every nervous system. So I just wanted to offer that for Melanie and anyone else where the havening is like a no-go for them.
Yeah,
Okay.
brilliant.
So the money love story, or just the money story, I've actually since learned there's some real scientific backing for this kind of practice. There was a wonderful, if anybody listens to the Huberman Labs podcast, Andrew Huberman, he shared about a data-driven journaling practice that is unbelievable in the way that the studies show that it really clears emotional charge. And I listened to that episode and I was like, that's why the money love story works. I didn't know that, but it's so cool. So this isn't just like, oh, do this, whatever. There's incredible data that shows us that when we write about the same experience multiple times, it actually clears it from our system. And
Mhm.
then when the scientists go back, they find that, it's kind of like a clean, energetic tone. So just because we're here together, you might even enhance the money love story exercise by writing out your money story for uh, the data shows 15 or 20 minutes. It doesn't actually matter which one. But write it for up to 20 minutes, just depending on how long, 4 days in a row. So
Ah,
you actually like write out your money story 4 days in a row. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but you are writing about the same intense event. So maybe you wouldn't do the entire money love story, but if there was one salient, like maybe it was like a really intense divorce, or maybe it was this, whatever kind of intense moment. My one friend had invested all of this money with this guy, and it turns out he was like running a Ponzi scheme, and she lost her entire retirement, in her late 40s. It was just such a major stressful bummer. And she and her husband just had to start all over again, and they had big careers, so this was like a big loss. So that sort of thing it's a hang up in our field
yeah.
around money, because we hold on to it. And so the money love story, the original practice that you're going to read about in the book, is to write out by hand, because when we write something by hand, it actually connects to our emotional brain in a very different way than if we type it. So if at all possible, write it by hand, and that creates a whole sensory experience that helps you metabolize the emotions in a way that you cannot when you're typing. So write it by hand and write out everything that happened in your relationship with money and all of the events. And then the most important piece of this is write out and mark down what you made it mean. So
Mm,
there's the facts of what happened, like, oh, my dad, when I was 5, moved out, and then my mom became a single mom. He didn't pay child support, and my mom really was stressed out. So that's the facts.
yeah.
And then the what you made it mean might have been that at 5, you made that mean that your father didn't love you, or that there was something, you'd done something wrong, or whatever it may be. So really pulling out the threads on the difference between what happened and what you made it mean. That's the story part. There's the facts and there's a story. I know my sister and I, we grew up, we're 2.5 years apart. And it's so funny because sometimes we'll be talking about something that happened in our childhood, and it's as though we experienced two completely different events, even though we were both there,
Yeah.
theoretically having the same experience. But her story about it is really different than my story about it, which is just evidence that we're all making everything up.
I
And
relate
then
to
we're
that so much. My
making
sister
our
and I are the same.
decisions,
Yeah.
right? Then we make all these decisions based on a made up story. So
Yeah.
this can really be a beautiful practice to start to bring your consciousness to the stories that you're telling that may not be serving you. And then just the act of bringing those to awareness oftentimes will help you to change the story so that you can tell a more supportive story and then live a more supportive story.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you just talked that through, because I did mine last night, and it made me really sad actually. And I'm like, I love a reframe. I think I'm quite good at it. Anyone who's been here a long time knows I love a reframe. But I didn't do the part where I kind of identified what I'd made it mean. I kind of wrote down the facts, and then I wrote, well, this has made me resilient, or this has made me
Hmm.
independent, or this has made me like I don't care. I'm not going to betray myself for money, kind of thing. But I didn't do the bit in the middle, which is like maybe that's what I felt about it. So maybe
I
that's
think that's an update that I've developed over the last 11 years. I'm not
yeah.
sure that I put that in the book, but I love what the piece that you said, which reminds me, because I didn't just say this verbally, and so I'll just highlight, also putting down, when relevant, what is the gift of
Yeah.
that experience. Not every experience has an overt gift. And I'm not somebody who says like everything happens for a reason. Like sometimes it's just terrible and that's just what it is.
Mm.
But when we can go back and say not only what we made it mean, but also, and then how may that have served us, and who were the players, and how might they have been angels in our lives to help us become the people we were meant to be. These experiences shape us. And when we can reframe them to see them through the eyes of gratitude and blessings, to the degree that we can, it can really free up a lot of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, let us know if you've done the story, if you've done your story. I know some of you were working on it. Let us know in the chat. Kate, I wanted to ask you as well, because there's one thing that I'm finding really hard to reframe, and that is in a previous life, I was a very hard-working, hard-partying journalist, and I've probably spent 2 decades going out. Now I'm doing sober 24. I'm in a different place now. But as I go through my money story, I just feel like I just wasted so much money
Mm.
and so much time
Yeah.
in the pub, basically. And
Mhm.
I really can't reframe that. Like it's
Yeah,
just a
that's a
waste.
hard one. Yeah,
Like
it
I don't
is.
really see. I mean, probably have some fun times. I
Yeah,
get it, but
totally.
it's really fun, isn't it? Until it's not. But I kind of like I just feel like that just feels like yeah, a waste and a shame. I'm trying to
Yeah.
work the reframe on that.
Yeah, and perhaps in a case like that, there's not an obvious reframe, and that's okay. Perhaps the exercise is actually forgiveness,
Mm,
to really just set yourself free. Because when we are holding on to resentment towards ourselves or others, certainly towards ourselves, I'm sure you've heard this expression before, that not forgiving someone is like taking poison and expecting another person to die. And when we hold on to resentments for ourselves, towards ourselves, and like won't let something go like that, it's
mm,
just like taking poison and then killing ourselves. I mean, there's just literally not helping us in any way, which is hard. It's a bit of a it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to feel it, but that's where I really love practicing ritual and ceremony. Um, for many thousands of years, humans have gathered in ritual, in ceremony, because when we come into ceremonial space, it's like we suspend time and place, and we're able to tap into more of the energy of like timelessness, and the veil between the worlds becomes thinner, and there's a quickening available in our growth and in our access to our true power, because we're stepping out of our personality, we're stepping out of like these limitations and these stories. And so I really recommend going into a forgiveness ritual where you maybe do a writing about this and then do a burn and set yourself free from
mm.
that history, and just bless and love that version of Tony, and then just let yourself let it go. And it might take a many times of doing that ritual, and a great time to do it is around the full moon, which is
Okay.
March 25th.
Okay, yeah, good to know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do feel like it's a different person now. So I kind of have, I
Yeah.
think I have the compassion for that person or that
Yes.
part of me. But I think the forgiveness is maybe the next step. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Emotional freedom techniques, EFT. Oh, have you ever
Mm.
done that, Kate? Do you know much about that?
Yes. I love EFT. I'm not an expert in it, but my friends, the Ortners over at the Tapping Solution, Jess and Nick and Alex, are just amazing. They're three siblings who run this company together. So anybody who wants to check them out, they have a bunch of free tapping meditations on their Tapping Solution app. And I bet you they have a forgiveness tapping meditation.
Sure. Okay, that's my
Mhm.
homework then, right?
Yeah. Or I'm sure there's some on YouTube, but I like the Ortners.
Yeah. So the book kind of goes through the emotional side, which we kind of touched on, but then also the practical side. Do you think that equally is important to get a handle on for people?
I do, but I
Yeah.
think it's more important to start with the emotional, because if we start with only the practical, it usually won't stick if we haven't cleared up the emotional stuff first,
Yeah.
or at
Do you,
least simultaneously.
yeah. Do you have is there a particular challenge that a lot of people have around either is it the emotional side or like is there I'm just thinking about kind of so many people have kind of have done your courses, read the book. Is there something that kind of comes up again and again that you're
Yes.
coaching people through?
There are two things, and they're related.
Yeah.
One is that we live in a society that has taught us about the lie of scarcity and also the lie of separation. So that really, at the root of most money hangups, is the lie of separation or the lie of scarcity. And the lie of separation tells us that what happens to me is can be harmful. Like if I make more money, that automatically means somebody makes less. And
Mm,
so the lie of scarcity says there's not enough to go around. And if somebody else has more, I automatically have less. If I have less, somebody else automatically has more. Um, the nature of currency is just, that's not actually how global currency works. It's completely pretend. And so it literally doesn't work that way. And what we know from the data that Buckminster Fuller had shared during his lifetime, and also more recently, Heather McGhee in an incredible book called The Sum of Us, is that there are enough resources on the planet for everyone to live a good life. There actually are. Now, we do have a distribution issue, and the distribution issue comes from us buying into the lie of scarcity. Because when we've bought into the lie of scarcity, we believe there's not enough to go around. And then some folks respond to that by hoarding way more resources than they actually could ever use in a lifetime. But when we know the truth that there's plenty, that there's more than enough to go around, of course, we can find this sense of sufficiency in our own lives, this sense of there's finally enough. And then we're also able to allow resources to flow into our lives and then out of our lives also to bless other people. And that connects in with the lie of separation. So the lie of separation again says like, oh, I better keep my income low so that other people can have more, or oh, that greedy, so-and-so, whatever, they have more, therefore I have less. It's their fault. So both of those things are based on the lie of scarcity and the lie of separation. What's actually true is if I can open up to receive as much as possible, it can come into my life. And if I don't buy into the lie of scarcity, I get to be a conduit to allow it to flow through. The more income my business makes, the more jobs I can create, the more I can bless my community, the more there is for everyone who my life touches. And so at the core, when we are finding ourselves in lack and limitation, we really need to ask, am I buying into right now? Am I hooked on the lie of scarcity, or am I hooked on the lie of separation, or both? Because our true nature is that we are all waves in the same ocean. We're all made of the same divine substance. We are not separate, and our nervous systems actually know this. That's how mirror neurons work. So when I'm talking to you, the mirror neurons in our bodies are now, of course, it's a little different on Zoom, but it's still happening. Like, we're co-regulating. There's an energy on this Zoom room where there is a particular frequency that our bodies are able to co-regulate with one another, which is why community matters so much. And it is one of the leading causes of health, is being in healthy, safe community. Our mirror neurons cannot tell the difference between something that's happening to our own body and something that's happening to other people's bodies who we identify with, which is why it's a real problem to continue to post traumatic world events on social media. But it's also why it's really important to celebrate collective joys, because when I'm witnessing you in celebration and expansion, my nervous system is getting the message, I can have that too. And in fact, it's happening for me too. And so your healing becomes my healing and vice versa, which is why something like this kind of book club is so much more powerful than reading a book by yourself. You get significantly more benefit because our bodies do not believe the lie of separation.
That's incredible. I know a lot. I talk about expanders. Like, do you know Lacey Phillips? I'm sure you do.
I've heard of her. I don't know her personally.
Okay. So I kind of so she talks about expanders, and I am consciously like seeking out and I think I just thought it was the opposite of this kind of separation and the scarcity mindset, which is look for people doing good, look for rich people who are nice, look for rich people who do good things with their money. But it's so interesting what you say about that your body is then kind of like taking in the message and that it's happening to you too, and then that really is expanding you in every way.
It really is. I mean, a real practical example of this in my own life, I had some very difficult early years of motherhood. I did not experience early motherhood as blissful or joyful. It was like a real slog, and it was pretty traumatic. And I have a couple of friends who had kids several years after me. They're a few years younger. And they are experiencing this level of bliss and joy in motherhood that is so beautiful. And there's even a level at which I believe witnessing them and celebrating them in the paradigm of, if they're having that on some level, I'm having it too, because we're not separate. So it's like I'm allowing celebrating them and witnessing them in the joy of their motherhood to go back and help me heal the part that wasn't able to have that directly. But it's like I got to have it through them. And
Mm.
so if we can approach our lives in that way, uh, there's so much bounty available, because we literally can have anything anyone else is having at any time.
Yeah. And being happy for other people and being, like
Yes.
you said, celebrating joy. I think that's so
And
important, isn't it?
yeah, it really is. And I think it can start with literally being happy for them, but there's also a level at which it's like, it's hard to describe, it's energetic. But there is a level at which when I celebrate them, I'm happy for them for sure, but I'm also letting it into my body as mine, even though it's not happening directly to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 It's one of my best hacks.
Is there how do we do it?
Yeah. How do we do it? I think that it comes back to allowing ourselves to be in our senses and be in our hearts. So, for example, let's say my girlfriend Mel posts a reel about how joyful motherhood is for her, like this real life example. Mel is actually also a British Hay House author, Mel Wells. She's so great.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. So like, I think our cultural programming would have us go into then the lie of separation, which is like, oh, well, nice for you. And that, right? Especially if you're someone who didn't have that experience, and like maybe you could post less videos of your cute baby and your hot husband, right? Like we do, like we do this stuff. Now, judgment and that kind of like,
Yeah.
that is actually a sign that our nervous systems are dysregulated, and it is a low grade fight response. When we go into judgment and attacking other people, even if it's just in our mind, that is a fight response. That's a sign that we're in a sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic nervous system response is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so judgment is a low grade fight response. So that's just a signal for us to know, like, oh, wow, that's interesting. My nervous system is experiencing her reality as a threat.
Yeah.
Wow. That has nothing to do with her, right? That has to do with me. So that was what not to do. But what to actually do is to allow myself to watch that video and let it take over my senses and feel the yumminess of little baby Sky, and like feel the joy of what that might be like for Mel. Like I can literally sort of drop the boundaries between us and allow myself to just experience the joy and the lift of that in my body while watching her.
Yeah.
And I know that's not very specific, but that's what I'm doing.
No, that's amazing. But there is really something it's almost like we don't like people. We're not very good at kind of like seeing people celebrate or be joyous or celebrating what they have. I mean, quite often we think it's a British thing of like, don't show off or don't be, kind of like
It's
it's
also a New England thing, which is where I'm from. We're very British in our way.
passive aggressive kind of like you say, yeah, don't be having so much fun. But then also like when you're talking about money and making money, there's definitely something around that, isn't it? Did you feel like, I suppose by the time you wrote the book, you were already talking about money and running courses and it was your
Yeah.
thing. But did you feel a vulnerability, like saying that I'm the money lady, I'm the money
I
queen?
did. I
Yeah.
did. I still kind of do. I am so clear that this is what I'm called to do. Like this work chose me. I did not decide one day like I'm going to be the money lady. It's just it's I don't know. I'm just here for it. But yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to talk about money. You're not supposed to talk about sex, right? And these are things that are part of all of our lives in a very big way, but you're supposed to sort of like pretend they're not happening, which is ridiculous. And I think it has to do with money and sex and so many different things connected to those are related to our relationship with our power, which is really the same thing as saying they're our connection to source, because our connection to our power is our connection to source. And you can call it God, you can call it universe, you can call it life, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. It is the power that runs through all of us. And it's essentially like our animating force, which is basically electricity. And that's the way it, you know, the difference between being alive and being dead is electricity. It's energy. It's something that we can all feel, and it's something that we all have in common. And so we've been taught to disconnect from our power. You know, long-term religious programming, this isn't so much anymore, but there are many places where certainly historically we were told that we could not have a direct connection with God, that the only way you could access God was through a priest or through paying the church, right? And so there has been a systematic plan over thousands of years to disconnect humans from their power. And one of the ways that we've done that is by saying that it's like shameful to talk about money, or because money is one very practical way that we access power.
Sure. Is there any other area of the book and the money love story that you kind of like wish that you had written differently, or that you would like to add to now? Like we talked about in the audio, there are a few kind of
there's a few asides for sure. I mean, I think that I did mention in the book, but I would just highlight probably in a different way, or in a new way, how systemic inequity and systemic oppression fall into this. You know, certainly in the United States, we have, you know, a history of enslaving people. And it's a dark history, and it is very interrelated to some people's experience of money, because the way that folks were very purposefully kept from passing along generational wealth, and, you know, redlining in school districts and lack of access to education. And so I would speak more about that is true, and we do not start out on an equal playing field, and continuing to focus only on that doesn't actually transform that history. That doesn't help us to heal as a society around those traumas. What does is actually healing our bodies, healing our nervous system, because those traumas live in the nervous system, and then we recreate them over and over again until we allow them to become conscious. And so I probably would have, and I will in my next book, make sure that that is clearly spoken of, so that folks from all different backgrounds can really feel like, there's not something wrong with me if I'm feeling like this is unfair, and it's not just a mindset issue. But also, and I would say, and how can we all take what we inherited and enhance it and make the most of it?
Sure. So it's recognizing it and then moving forward, using techniques to move forward. Do you think anybody can improve their relationship with money?
Oh, for sure. For sure. It does take a willingness, and it requires, I think, some humility to really say, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing because no one taught me. You know, like, this wasn't taught in schools. Most of our parents didn't give us a great financial education. So if this is an area of struggle, there's nothing wrong with you. And it does require to be humble and be the beginner and say, like, okay, I'm gonna, in order to heal something, I do need to admit that I need help. And that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Admit I need help, and admit I don't know everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Admit I
And the
know
great news
nothing.
is, like, oh my gosh, I mean, we have access to so much. I was doing some research this afternoon about budgeting and percentages and whatever, and I was like, the internet is amazing. I mean, you just learn anything for free. Talk about abundance. And you don't even have to have a computer. You go to the library.
Yeah, there's always ways, isn't there? There's always ways to do it. But I think we also always do find ways to not do things that if we're not, yeah.
We
If we
do,
don't want to do them.
because what's really important to understand is for our nervous system, anything that's unfamiliar is recognized as a threat. So when we begin to take action towards our desires are usually things that we haven't experienced before. So our nervous system is like, don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm scared. And so it will, a lot of self-sabotage can show up where it's like, yeah, of course I could go to the library and do this research, or, invest in this course, or show up for the book club, and then we get all this resistance. And I
Yeah.
do talk about the resistance in the book, but I didn't understand when I wrote it that resistance is actually our nervous system trying to keep us in a reality that is familiar, because anything that's not familiar is registering as unsafe. So the way that we can work with that is like, oh, I'm experiencing resistance. That means I'm dysregulated. That means I need to signal safety to my body, not just like push through.
Yeah. And it also means something good might be happening.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It means that
So
you're on the
leading
verge
to
of a
that.
breakthrough if
Yeah,
you're experiencing resistance, for sure.
totally. Guys, we've got about 5 minutes left. So if you have any questions, then drop them in the chat. I've seen a few people, someone actually, they've just been commenting about the kind of not teaching this in schools.
Mm.
And it's so true, isn't it? I think now that I'm doing I was talking to David offline earlier, now that I'm doing my Sober 24 and I'm doing this money work, I'm doing lots of like nervous system stuff. So I'm kind of like inviting in all the feeling in of the feelings. I'm not really enjoying it so much. But one thing I have noticed, I really I'm feeling that like the inequality of the world, which is something I've always felt strongly about, but I kind of like, well, I can't do anything about it. So just kind of crack on. But I think because I'm now inviting in, like, I'm just kind of like getting in touch with a bit more with my kind of like, yeah, my feelings and things. And I do find that quite hard. So, um,
It's hard
yeah,
to feel. It really
yeah,
is. Like, it
not
hurts.
fun.
No, it's not
It's
fun.
not fun.
And we weren't taught how,
Yeah.
and we weren't taught that it was okay. But one of the best ways that we can heal and update our nervous systems and actually collectively transform is by allowing ourselves to feel, because our unfelt feelings get stuck in our bodies and they keep us stuck in old patterning. And when we allow ourselves to feel and fully go into an emotion, it usually will shift in about 90 seconds.
Really?
Yep.
It's just like letting it come up rather
Just
than,
letting it come up and not needing to tell a story about it, not needing to even know why, just like letting yourself take the ride. And then usually, you have a good cry for 90 seconds and you're like, oh, great. What's next?
yeah, sure.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll try that. My final question to you then, just before we go, thank you so much for your time, guys. Thanks for
Mhm.
all the comments and everything. I think you are a self-help fan, aren't you?
Oh, for
Self-development.
sure.
What are you reading at the moment, or who are you
Oh,
speaking to? Because
I'm
I love
reading.
your podcast and all the guests you get on, and there's so many books, and I'm just like,
Oh, so many books.
there's more
So many
going on the
books.
list every
I'm
day.
always reading like 10 things, but I recently did not write it, read a great book called The Garden Within by Dr. Anita Phillips,
Mhm.
which is about the nervous system and the parallels between the nervous system and the plant world, so nature, and also the parallels in scripture, which I think is really interesting. I'm not actually particularly a Bible person, but I thought it was fascinating. So that was a great book. And then also, I also am reading a really cool book called The Molecule of More, which is all about dopamine and the way that it is a massive driver for all of our behavior and how to work with our bodies to be more conscious about our drives. So,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah,
it's cool.
brilliant. And that sounds kind of nerdy, like as well,
Super
like
nerdy.
in a great way.
That is totally my thing. Like I don't read like heavy science books, but I love sciency books that are for regular people. Like I
Mm.
recently read another one by Michael Easter called Scarcity Brain, about how we are wired for scarcity and how we can overcome that to really tap into abundance, but it's very nerdy and like a lot about the data.
Okay. I love it. Great combination. And then a final question, which is great. When is the Do Less Planner coming back into stock? That's a great.
Oh, great question. So the Do Less Planner is in stock in digital format. And because most of you probably live in the UK, I would recommend purchasing the digital copy and taking it to your local print shop and just having them print it out.
Brilliant.
I don't know when we will make physical copies again. And also, we never managed to figure out the shipping to the UK without it being so incredibly expensive.
It's painful,
And
isn't it?
I just would rather you save the money and get it
Yeah,
printed yourself.
sure, totally.
Mhm.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. It's been wonderful
Thank
to speak to
you.
you. Thank you for this book. We're so
You're so
excited to read it
welcome.
over the next 2 months. And thank you guys for being here. Congratulations for showing up for yourselves, for us, for everybody. And have a great rest of your evening, rest of your day, Kate. And rest of.
Thank you. So
Bye,
nice to
guys.
meet everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much. Take care.